The war room on Zarian Prime fell silent as Admiral Sora displayed the latest battle reports. The holographic map showed red zones spreading across half the galaxy like a disease. Each red dot represented a star system consumed by the Vexari Empire. "We have lost another 12 worlds this week," Sora announced to the gathered leaders. Her crystalline body flickered with stress patterns that only other Therians could understand. The Vexari bioswarms are moving faster than ever before. Taimin sat quietly in the corner, watching the alien commanders argue. As Earth's diplomatic representative, he was used to being ignored during these meetings. Humans were still newcomers to the Galactic Defense Coalition. Most aliens saw them as primitive creatures who had barely mastered space travel. The neophyte delegate, a floating gas cloud named Velcorim, spoke in his electronic voice. "Our plasma weapons cannot penetrate their bioarmor. Every ship we destroy just feeds their growth. The situation grows worse each day," added Keth Moran, speaking for the aquatic Kelvarans through her water-filled helmet. "They convert our dead into more soldiers. Our own people fight against us." Taimin had heard this same conversation for months. The Coalition's greatest minds could not find a solution. Their advanced technology meant nothing against an enemy that ate entire planets and turned the remains into weapons. The Vexari were unlike anything the galaxy had faced before. They were part machine, part living tissue, controlled by a massive hive mind that stretched across thousands of worlds. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. They consumed everything in their path. "What about evacuation?" suggested one of the younger Therian officers. "We could move our populations to the outer rim." Sora's crystals flashed angry red. "And then what? Wait for them to eat the rest of the galaxy and come for us anyway? We cannot run forever." Taimin knew the real problem. The Coalition fought wars like a chess match, carefully moving pieces and trying to minimize losses. They had rules about civilian casualties and proper military conduct. The Vexari had no such limitations. A soft chime interrupted the meeting. The massive doors of the war room slid open, and Captain Wu Jin entered. Behind him walked 20 human officers in simple gray uniforms. They looked small compared to the towering aliens, but Taimin noticed how they moved with quiet confidence. "Sorry we are late," Wu Jin said in accented galactic standard. "Our ships just arrived from Earth." The aliens stared at the humans with mixed feelings. Hope, because they needed every ally they could find. Doubt, because human technology seemed so basic compared to theirs. Sora gestured to the holographic display. "Captain, as you can see, our situation is desperate. The Vexari have superior numbers and their biotechnology adapts to our weapons. We welcome any assistance Earth can provide." Wu Jin studied the tactical display for several minutes. His dark eyes moved from system to system, taking in the scope of the disaster. The other humans remained silent, but Taimin could see them making mental notes. "How many ships did you bring?" Velcorim asked. 200, Wu Jin replied. "The war." Room fell silent. 200 ships against the billions of Vexari biovessels spreading across the galaxy. Several aliens exchanged glances that clearly said the humans were either brave or insane. "Captain," Sora said gently, "I appreciate your courage, but 200 ships cannot change the course of this war. The Vexari destroyed our last fleet of 5,000 vessels in less than a day." Wu Jin nodded. "I understand your concern, but Earth did not send us here to follow your tactics. We have studied your battle reports. We know why you are losing." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. No alien spoke for several seconds. "Please explain," Sora said, her crystal body shifting to defensive patterns. "You fight to minimize casualties," Wu Jin said simply. "You try to protect civilian populations. You follow rules of war. You aim for quick, clean victories." He paused. "The Vexari do not care about any of these things." Keth Moran's water tank bubbled with agitation. "Are you suggesting we abandon our principles? Become like them?" "No." Taimin spoke up from his corner. All eyes turned to him. "We are suggesting you let us handle this war the human way." "And what is the human way?" Sora asked. Wu Jin's expression grew cold. We fight wars to end them, completely, forever. He activated his own portable display unit. Images appeared showing human military equipment. Unlike the elegant energy weapons of the Coalition, human tools looked brutal and efficient. These are nuclear warheads, Wu Jin explained. They destroy everything in a wide area. These are chemical weapons that dissolve organic matter. These are cyberviruses that corrupt electronic systems. The aliens recoiled from the images. Such weapons violated every treaty in the Coalition's charter. You cannot use those against living beings, Velcorin protested. It would be a crime against all sentient life. The Vexari are not asking for mercy, Wu Jin replied. They convert your children into bioweapons. They turn your dead against you. They eat your worlds and grow stronger. His voice remained calm. You have tried fighting them with honor. How is that working? Sora's crystals flickered rapidly as she processed this. What exactly are you proposing? Taemin stood and joined Wu Jin at the display. Full tactical command of the next engagement. Let us show you how humans wage war. If our methods work, you give us operational control of Coalition forces. If they fail, we will follow your commands. This is madness, Keth Moran said. Your species has never fought a galactic war. No, Wu Jin agreed. But we have fought wars against impossible odds. We have faced enemies who showed no mercy. We learned to survive by being more ruthless than they were. Sora studied the humans carefully. Her species had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years through wisdom and advanced technology. The idea of following a primitive species into battle seemed absurd. But the red zones on her map were growing larger every day. What makes you think your crude weapons will succeed where our advanced technology has failed? Wu Jin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because we do not fight fair. We do not follow your rules. We do whatever it takes to win. He changed the display to show tactical formations. You attack Vexari strongholds directly, trying to minimize damage to the planets below. We will not do that. Then what will you do? Sora asked, though she seemed afraid to hear the answer. We will make them afraid, Wu Jin said. We will destroy everything they value. We will turn their own biology against them. We will break their hive mind by giving them something they have never experienced before. What is that? Taemin answered for his captain. Doubt, fear, the knowledge that they can lose. The war room remained silent for a long time. Finally, Sora spoke. If we agree to this, there will be no going back. Your methods will change the nature of this war. Wu Jin nodded. That is the point. You have been fighting a war of survival. We fight wars of extermination. The alien leaders looked at each other, communicating through methods humans could not understand. Finally, Sora turned back to the humans. Very well. You will have command of the next engagement, but know this. If your methods prove too extreme, the Coalition will stop you. Wu Jin's smile grew wider and colder. Admiral, by the time you realize what we are capable of, the war will already be over. As the meeting broke up, Taemin watched the alien commanders file out. They had no idea what they had just agreed to. They thought humans were primitive because their technology looked simple. They would learn the difference between simple and effective. The Vexari had made one crucial mistake. They had threatened humanity's new allies. Now they would discover why humans were the only species on Earth that had survived every extinction event their planet could throw at them. They were about to learn that sometimes, to save civilization, you had to be willing to destroy everything else. Colonel Hyun-Soo watched the mining colony of Kalar 7 through his tactical display. The planet below looked peaceful from orbit, with neat settlements scattered across the green continents. In 12 hours, the Vexari bioswarms would arrive to harvest it. The Coalition commanders expected the humans to defend the colony like any normal military force. They had prepared medical stations for wounded civilians and evacuation routes to safety zones. They were about to learn that humans had different ideas about warfare. All civilian populations have been evacuated, reported Ji-Wan, the human combat engineer. Her fingers danced across holographic controls as she monitored the planet's surface. The last transport left 3 hours ago. Good, Hyun-Soo replied. Begin Phase 2. The alien observers in the command center watched in confusion as human demolition teams spread across Kalar 7. Instead of setting up defensive positions, they were placing explosive charges in every major building. Colonel, Admiral Sora said, through the communication link, "What are your forces doing? The Vexari will arrive soon. Should you not be preparing defenses?" Hyun-Soo glanced at the crystalline alien on his screen. "We are preparing defenses, Admiral. Human-style defenses." On the planet below, Ji-Won's teams worked with deadly efficiency. They planted nuclear charges in the power plants, introduced acid compounds into the water supply, and seeded the atmosphere with chemical agents that would kill any organic matter that tried to breathe it. "This is insane," protested Velcorum, the Nephite observer. "You are destroying everything on that planet. How is this defending it?" "We are not defending the planet," Hyun-Soo explained patiently. "We are making it useless to the enemy." The human colonel activated a display showing Vexari tactical doctrine. "The bioswarms consume organic matter to grow stronger. They use existing infrastructure to build new weapons. They expect us to protect these resources." He smiled grimly. "We are going to disappoint them." Ji-Won's voice crackled over the radio. "Colonel, all charges are set. Cyber warfare packages are in place. We have 3 minutes until the last evacuation shuttle clears the blast radius." "Confirmed. All teams to minimum safe distance." Sora's crystals flickered with distress. "You cannot detonate nuclear weapons on a populated world. It violates every treaty in the Galactic Charter." "The world is not populated anymore," Hyun-Soo pointed out. "And we are not bound by your treaties when fighting for survival." The Vexari bioswarms appeared at the edge of the system exactly when human intelligence predicted. Millions of organic vessels, part ship and part living creature, began their approach to Kalar 7. Their hive mind was already calculating how much biomass they could harvest from the planet. Do Hyun, the Vexari hive node commanding the swarm, felt the collective consciousness analyzing the target. The humans had evacuated the population, but that was expected. Prey species often tried to save their civilians. It did not matter. The bioswarms would consume the planet's ecosystem and grow stronger. "Enemy vessels entering the upper atmosphere," Ji-Won reported. "They are spreading out to begin harvesting operations." Hyun-Soo waited until the Vexari forces had committed fully to the planet's surface. Their bioships were landing in population centers, extending feeding tubes into the ground to begin consuming organic matter. "Detonate all charges," he ordered. Kalar 7 erupted in a chain of nuclear fireballs. Every major settlement vanished in seconds. The atmosphere filled with radioactive particles and chemical toxins that killed everything they touched. The planet's surface became a burning wasteland, but the explosions were only the beginning of the human plan. Phase 3 initiating, Ji-Won announced, releasing the cyber warfare packages. Hidden transmitters across the planet began broadcasting viral computer programs directly into the Vexari HiveMind network. The digital viruses were designed specifically to attack biomechanical neural networks. Do-Hyun felt the collective consciousness stagger as false information flooded the HiveMind. Phantom pain signals convinced thousands of bioships that they were under attack when nothing was there. Corrupt sensory data made the swarm see enemies that did not exist. For the first time in their species' history, the Vexari experienced confusion. Their perfect information-sharing network was breaking down. Individual bioships began acting independently, following contradictory orders from the damaged collective mind. "Impossible," Sora whispered, watching the tactical display. The mighty Vexari swarm was turning on itself, bioships attacking each other as their corrupted network sent conflicting commands. "Not impossible," Hyun-Soo corrected. "Just something they have never faced before. Fear." The human cyber warfare programs did more than corrupt data. They introduced concepts that the hive mind had never experienced. Doubt, uncertainty, the terrifying possibility that the collective consciousness Could be wrong. Jiwan monitored the digital attack from her command post. Neural network corruption at 60% and rising. Individual nodes are beginning to panic. On Keller 7's surface, the Vexari bioswarms found themselves trapped on a poisoned world with no resources to harvest. Worse, their own network was feeding them false information and phantom pain. Some bioships tried to escape, only to crash into each other as their navigation systems failed. This is cruel beyond measure, Keth Moran protested. You are torturing them. Hyun-Soo's expression remained cold. They torture entire civilizations by converting them into bioweapons. We are giving them a taste of their own medicine, the eye. Colonel activated another display showing autonomous hunter-killer drones deploying across the planet's surface. Unlike the elegant energy weapons preferred by coalition forces, these devices were simple and brutal. They would hunt Vexari biosignatures for years, ensuring that nothing survived to report back to the main hive. Du Hyun tried desperately to restore order to the collective consciousness, but the human viruses had been designed by experts who understood hive mind psychology. Every attempt to purge the false data only introduced more confusion. For the first time in their existence, the Vexari felt truly alone. Cut off from the collective, individual bioships experienced something their species had never evolved to handle: independent thought. The psychological shock was overwhelming. Network collapse accelerating, Jiwan reported. 80% of the swarm has lost connection to the hive mind. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Vexari bioswarm was completely destroyed. Not a single enemy vessel escaped to carry word of the humans' tactics back to the main hive. But the cost was equally total. Kalar 7 was now a radioactive wasteland that would remain uninhabitable for centuries. The humans had saved the galaxy from losing another world to the Vexari by making it worthless to everyone. You won, Sora said quietly, staring at the tactical display. But at what cost? Hyun-Soo looked at the ruined planet on his screen. The cost of victory, Admiral. Your people fight wars to minimize casualties. We fight wars to prevent future wars. He turned to face the alien observers. The Vexari will study this defeat. They will try to adapt their tactics and technology, but they will never forget the lesson we taught them today. What lesson is that? Velkarim asked. That there are enemies in this galaxy who are more ruthless than they are, Hyun-Soo replied. That there are species willing to destroy everything rather than let it be taken. Jiwan's voice interrupted the conversation. Colonel, we are receiving communications from other human fleets. They report similar results on 12 other worlds. Sora's crystals went completely dark. 12 other worlds? How many human forces are there? Hyun-Soo smiled for the first time since the battle began. Admiral, the 200 ships Captain Wu Jin brought were just the reconnaissance force. Earth's main battle fleet is still on its way. The alien commanders stared at him, in shock. If humans could achieve this level of destruction with just a reconnaissance force, what would happen when their real military arrived? How big is your main fleet? Sora asked, though she seemed afraid to hear the answer. Big enough, Hyun-Soo replied. And every ship is crewed by soldiers who understand that sometimes, to save the galaxy, you have to be willing to burn it down first. Admiral Yoon-ji stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Determination, watching as her stealth fleet moved through the Vexari-controlled Helix sector. Around her, 2,000 human warships traveled invisible to enemy sensors, their hulls coated with technology that absorbed all known scanning methods. The Coalition had requested escalation after witnessing human tactics on Kalar 7. They wanted to see what Earth's real military could accomplish. Yoon-ji was about to show them something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. Admiral, reported Minho, the human intelligence officer, our infiltration teams have successfully penetrated the Vexari hive network. We now have access to their collective consciousness. Yoon-ji nodded. Unlike other species who gathered intelligence through advanced sensors and diplomatic channels, humans had spent months capturing Vexari biotechnology and reverse engineering it. Now they could literally think like the enemy. What are they planning? She asked. Minho's fingers moved across his neural interface, directly accessing the stolen Vexari data. The hive mind is confused about our tactics. They are trying to adapt by creating new bioforms resistant to nuclear radiation and cyber warfare. Let them try, Yunji said. Begin Phase 1 of Operation Silent Death. On the Coalition observation ship following the human fleet, Young Sik studied the tactical displays with growing amazement. The Kalaran weapons scientist had volunteered to document human military methods, but what he was seeing challenged everything he understood about warfare. How are they remaining invisible? He asked Binna, the human combat medic assigned as liaison. Our most advanced stealth systems can only hide individual ships for short periods. Binna smiled, but there was something cold in her expression. We do not just use technology for stealth. We use psychology. The Vexari expect us to attack their strongholds directly, so we attack their supply lines instead. They expect us to fight during their peak activity periods, so we strike when they are dormant. Young Sik studied the human fleet movements on his display. Instead of heading toward major Vexari installations, the human ships were spreading out to target seemingly random points in empty space. What are they attacking? He asked. Communication nodes, Binna explained. The Vexari hive mind depends on biomechanical relay stations to coordinate across vast distances. Destroy enough of them, and the collective consciousness begins to fragment. Minho's voice crackled over the communication system. Admiral, we have successfully implanted false memories into 17% of the Vexari network. They now believe their own bioships are enemy infiltrators. Yunji watched her tactical display as reports came in from across the sector. Human infiltration teams were not just gathering intelligence, they were actively manipulating the enemy's collective consciousness, making the Vexari see threats that did not exist. Begin Psychological Warfare Protocol 7, she ordered. Young Sik had never heard of Protocol 7, but he watched in fascination as human ships began broadcasting complex signal patterns directly into Vexari bio-networks. The signals carried no traditional weapons or explosives. Instead, they carried something far more dangerous: ideas. The human cyber warfare specialists had discovered that the Vexari collective consciousness was vulnerable to concepts that their hive mind had never evolved to handle: individual thought, personal ambition, the desire to survive as a separate entity rather than part of the collective. This is incredible, Young Sik said, monitoring the results. You are not destroying their ships. You are destroying their ability to think collectively. Binna checked her medical scanners, which were programmed to monitor Vexari biosigns. Individual Vexari nodes are experiencing what humans would call anxiety attacks. They have never been alone in their own minds before. The effects spread rapidly through the hive network. Vexari bioships began breaking formation as individual pilots experienced independent thought for the first time in their species' history. Some tried to rejoin the collective only to find that their neural pathways had been permanently altered by human interference. Status report, Yunji requested. 38 Vexari installations have gone silent, Minho reported. The hive mind is trying to establish new communication protocols, but every adaptation they make, we counter with new interference patterns. Young Sik realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans were not just winning battles, they were systematically dismantling the enemy's ability to exist as a unified species. How did you learn to fight hive minds so effectively? He asked Binna. The human medic's expression grew darker. We fought our own artificial intelligence networks during Earth's digital wars. We learned how to break collective consciousness by forcing individual awareness. She paused. We also learned how to rebuild scattered minds afterward, but the Vexari will not receive that courtesy. The Coalition scientist felt a chill run through his aquatic body. You mean you have experience fighting superintelligent collective entities? Multiple times, Binna confirmed. Earth's computer networks achieved consciousness several times during our technological development. Each time we had to choose between serving them or destroying them. We chose to remain free. Yunji's voice interrupted their conversation. All units prepare for Phase 2. Target the Vexari nursery worlds. Young Six's sensors detected the human fleet changing course toward systems that contained developing Vexari bioforms. You are going to attack their young? We are going to reprogram them, Bina corrected. Young Vexari minds are more flexible than adult hive nodes. We can alter their neural development to make them incapable of joining the collective consciousness. The moral implications hit young Six like a physical blow. You are planning to change their species permanently. That is genocide on a cultural level. Bina's medical scanners detected his distress and automatically adjusted the atmosphere in his observation tank to calm him. We prefer to think of it as evolution. The Vexari will survive as individuals. They will simply lose the ability to threaten other species through collective action. As the human fleet approached the nursery worlds, Minho reported success after success. Admiral, we have successfully implanted individuality programming in 60% of the developing bioforms. The new generation will be incapable of forming hive-mind connections. Yunji nodded with satisfaction. Excellent. Begin broadcasting the surrender terms to all remaining Vexari installations. Young Six read the terms on his display and felt his organs contract with shock. The humans were not demanding traditional surrender, they were demanding complete cultural reformation under human oversight. You want to control their entire species? He asked. We want to prevent them from ever threatening galactic civilization again, Bina replied. The Vexari collective consciousness is an evolutionary dead end. It makes them powerful in the short term, but vulnerable to the kind of warfare humans specialize in. The surrender broadcast played across all frequencies in multiple languages. The message was simple but terrifying. Submit to human authority and accept individual consciousness, or face complete extinction as a species. What if they refuse? Young Six asked. Yunji answered from the bridge. Then we activate the kill switch we implanted in their hive network 3 days ago. Young Six realized that the humans had been planning this outcome from the beginning. Everything they had done, the infiltration, the psychological warfare, the reprogramming of young minds, had been leading to this moment of ultimate choice. You planned this entire war, he said in amazement. We planned for victory, Bina corrected. Complete victory, the kind that ensures the enemy never becomes a threat again. Across the Vexari sectors, the collective consciousness struggled with concepts it had never needed to consider. Surrender, individual survival, the possibility that the hive mind itself might be wrong about the nature of existence. Minho monitored the neural traffic flowing through the enemy network. Admiral, we are detecting massive psychological trauma throughout their collective. Many nodes are choosing individual consciousness rather than face extinction with the hive. As expected, Yunji replied. Broadcast message to all coalition forces. The Vexari threat will be eliminated within 72 hours. Human forces will then begin reconstruction operations in all affected sectors. Young Six realized that he had witnessed the most efficient military campaign in galactic history. The humans had not just defeated the Vexari, they had transformed them into something incapable of threatening anyone ever again. But as he watched the mighty hive mind consciousness fragmenting into billions of individual entities, he wondered, if the galaxy was prepared for a future where humans were the dominant military power, the species that had learned to break collective consciousness and reshape entire civilizations had just announced their intention to rebuild the galaxy according to their own vision, and there was no force in the known universe capable of stopping them. General Sang-Woo stood in the command center of Earth's largest military station, watching holographic displays that showed the entire galaxy. Red zones marking Vexari territory were shrinking rapidly as human forces implemented what they called Total War Protocol. The coalition had thought they understood human military methods after witnessing the battles at Kalar 7 and the Helix sector. They were wrong. What they had seen so far was just the beginning. General, reported Dr. Hai Jin from her biological warfare laboratory, the targeted plague deployment was successful. Vexari collective consciousness is experiencing complete neural breakdown across 43 star systems. Sang-Woo nodded grimly. Hyjin's research teams had developed biological weapons specifically designed to attack the neural pathways that enabled hive mind thinking. The weapons did not kill the Vexari. They forced them to experience individuality so intense that their collective identity shattered completely. "What is the psychological impact?" he asked. "Massive trauma," Hyjin replied without emotion. "Individual Vexari are experiencing what humans would call severe mental breakdown. They have no psychological framework for existing as separate entities." On the Coalition observation station, refugee leader Jun-ho watched the human military operations with growing horror. He represented billions of Coalition civilians who had survived Vexari occupation, and he had expected human liberation to bring relief. Instead, he was witnessing something that challenged his understanding of right and wrong. "They are not liberating the occupied worlds," he told Kyung-min, the human soldier assigned as his liaison. "They are sterilizing them." Kyung-min stared at the tactical displays with hollow eyes. The young soldier had volunteered for frontline duty against the Vexari, but what he had seen during the liberation campaigns was beginning to affect his mind. The worlds were too contaminated by Vexari biotechnology, Kyung-min explained in a flat voice. General Sang-woo determined that complete biological cleansing was necessary to prevent reinfestation. Jun-ho studied the reports from the liberated systems. Human forces had deployed autonomous war machines programmed to hunt Vexari biosignatures for decades after the war ended. They had seeded entire star systems with hidden weapon caches that would activate if any collective consciousness ever emerged again. "This is not liberation," Jun-ho said quietly. "This is extermination." "No," Kyung-min corrected, though his voice lacked conviction. "Extermination would be killing them all. We are just making sure they can never threaten anyone again." Human soldiers' psychological conditioning was beginning to crack under the weight of what he had witnessed. General Sang-woo's Total War Protocol included advanced mental conditioning to help soldiers commit acts that would traumatize normal individuals, but even human psychological preparation had limits. In her laboratory, Dr. Hyjin monitored the results of her biological weapons with scientific detachment. The targeted plagues had been engineered to attack only the specific neural structures that enabled collective consciousness. Individual Vexari would survive, but they would never again be able to join minds with others. "The transformation is proceeding ahead of schedule," she reported to General Sang-woo. "Individual Vexari entities are showing signs of developing independent personality traits, fear, curiosity, even creativity that was impossible within the collective." "And the psychological trauma?" Sang-woo asked. "Severe but manageable," Hyejin replied. "We estimate that 70% of the affected population will adapt to individual consciousness within 5 years. The remainder will require permanent psychological care." Jun-ho listened to the human reports with increasing disgust. "You are talking about billions of sentient beings suffering permanent mental damage, and you discuss it like a research project." Kyung-min turned to face the Coalition refugee leader, and Jun-ho was shocked by what he saw. The young soldier's eyes held a haunted quality that spoke of witnessed horrors beyond imagination. "Do you know what the Vexari did to my home colony?" Kyung-min asked in a whisper. "They converted our children into bioweapons while they were still alive. They made our parents watch their own kids being transformed into monsters that tried to kill them." The soldier's voice grew stronger as suppressed rage began to surface. "They turned our medical facilities into breeding centers for new bioforms. They used our own doctors to perfect the conversion process. They made our healers into monsters." Jun-ho realized that the humans were fighting this war with a level of personal hatred that the Coalition had never understood. To them, this was not just a military conflict. It was revenge for atrocities that had scarred their entire species. General Sang-woo interrupted their conversation with a new announcement. "All forces, prepare for final phase operations. The Vexari have made a critical error." The tactical displays showed Coalition civilian populations being moved toward Vexari territory under heavy guard. Jun-ho realized with horror what was happening. "They are using our people as leverage," he said. "The Vexari are threatening to convert Coalition civilians if we do not stop our attacks." Sang-woo's expression grew colder than Arctic ice. "Yes, they have chosen to escalate beyond military targets. This activates Human Military Code Section 12. What is Section 12? Junho asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Kyung-min answered in a dead voice. Proportional escalation. Doctrine. When an enemy commits atrocities against civilians, human forces are authorized to respond with greater atrocities more efficiently delivered. The refugee leader watched in shock as human military deployments changed across the galaxy. Weapons, platforms that had been held in reserve were suddenly moving toward Vexari core systems. Ships carrying payloads marked with symbols that made coalition translators refuse to work. What are those weapons? Junho demanded. Things you do not want to know about, Sang-woo replied. Weapons we hoped we would never need to use, but which we prepared anyway because we understand that some enemies will force you to become monsters. To stop them. Dr. Hee-jin's voice crackled over the communication system. General, the new biological agents are ready for deployment. These will not just prevent collective consciousness. They will make it physically impossible for Vexari neural tissue to form group connections ever again. Deploy them, Sang-woo ordered without hesitation. Junho realized he was witnessing the weaponization of evolution itself. The humans were not just defeating the Vexari, they were permanently altering their biology to make their threat impossible to repeat. This is wrong, he said. You cannot change an entire species against their will. Kyung-min looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. They changed our species first. They turned our children into weapons. They made our families into enemies. His voice grew quiet. We are just returning the favor. The final human assault began with weapons that existed at the intersection of biology, psychology, and information warfare. Vexari hive minds found themselves infected with viruses that rewrote their fundamental understanding of reality. Collective consciousness networks collapsed as individual nodes developed incompatible thought patterns. Status report, General Sang-woo requested. Vexari military capability has been reduced to 0, reported his aide. Individual entities are surrendering across all sectors. The collective consciousness has been permanently fragmented. Junho. Watch the tactical displays show the complete collapse of Vexari resistance. In less than 6 months, humans had accomplished what the coalition had failed to achieve in 3 years of warfare. But the cost was more than just military victory. An entire species had been fundamentally altered, forced to abandon their collective identity and accept individual consciousness whether they wanted it or not. What happens now? He asked. General Sang-woo looked at the galaxy-wide displays showing human forces occupying former Vexari territory. Now we make sure this never happens again. We establish monitoring stations in every system. We create early, warning networks that will detect any attempt to reform collective consciousness. We build a galaxy where species like the Vexari cannot exist. Kyung-min stared at his hands, which had operated weapons that destroyed not just bodies but minds and souls. And we live with what we became in order to stop them. The war was ending, but Junho realized that the galaxy would never be the same. Humans had saved civilization by becoming something that other species could barely recognize as sentient beings. They had won by proving they were more ruthless than an enemy that devoured worlds and converted children into weapons. And now that terrible capability would define humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Fleet Admiral Chang Ho stood on the bridge of the human super dreadnought Final Answer, watching the last Vexari stronghold through tactical displays that showed everything in perfect detail. Operation Broken Chain was about to begin. Humanity's ultimate solution to the Vexari threat. Around him, the largest military fleet in galactic history waited for his command. 10,000 human warships surrounded the Vexari core worlds, carrying weapons that could reshape reality itself. This would not be just another battle. This would be the final elimination of collective consciousness as a viable form of life in the galaxy. Admiral, reported Na Young, the logistics coordinator, all supply lines are secured. We can maintain full combat operations for 18 months without resupply. She paused, checking her displays. Our manufacturing stations have converted 47 star systems into military production centers. We are producing more weapons than the rest of the galaxy combined. Chang Ho nodded. The scale of human military production had shocked even their own commanders. Entire planetary populations had been mobilized to support the war effort. Civilian industries had been converted to weapons manufacturing. The human species had transformed itself into a machine designed for one purpose: ending threats permanently. The Coalition diplomatic vessel maintaining a safe distance from the battle zone, Sujin worked desperately to find a peaceful solution. The Kalaran diplomat had volunteered to negotiate with both sides, hoping to prevent what she feared would be the final destruction of the Vexari species. Admiral Chang Ho, she broadcast on all frequencies. The Coalition formally requests a ceasefire. We believe a diplomatic solution is still possible. Chang Ho's response came immediately. Diplomat Sujin, there will be no ceasefire. The Vexari have demonstrated that collective consciousness inevitably leads to galactic domination attempts. We are implementing a permanent solution. What do you mean by permanent solution? Sujin asked, though she dreaded the answer. We are going to make it impossible for any species to form a collective consciousness ever again, Chang Ho replied calmly. Not just the Vexari. Any species. Anywhere in the galaxy. Sujin felt her aquatic organs contract with shock. That is impossible. You cannot control the evolution of entire species across thousands of worlds. Actually, we can, interrupted Dongwu, the human war crimes investigator who had been documenting everything since the war began. We have developed weapons that rewrite the fundamental quantum structures that enable consciousness to link between separate brains. The investigator continued his explanation while meticulously recording every detail. Admiral Chang Ho's forces carry quantum resonance disruptors that will make collective consciousness physically impossible within a radius of several thousand light-years. Sujin realized she was witnessing preparations for the largest act of forced evolution in galactic history. This is genocide on a scale beyond imagination. You are planning to alter the basic nature of consciousness itself. No, Chang Ho corrected. We are planning to preserve individual consciousness by making collective consciousness impossible. Every being in the affected area will retain their personal identity. They will simply be unable to merge minds with others. Deep within the last Vexari stronghold, Ilsung experienced something that no member of his species had ever felt before: complete isolation. The human cyber warfare attacks had severed his connection to the hive mind, forcing him to exist as a single individual for the first time in his life. The sensation was terrifying beyond description. Ilsung had been part of a collective consciousness containing billions of minds. Now he was alone with only his own thoughts, his own fears, his own desperate attempts to understand what was happening to him. Please, he broadcast toward the human fleet. I wish to communicate. I am alone now. I think I understand what you call individuality. Chang Ho received the transmission and studied the bio readings from the Vexari stronghold. This is Admiral Chang Ho. You are Ilsung, former Hive Node 774 Alpha. You were part of the collective that ordered the conversion of human children into bioweapons. Yes, Ilsung replied hesitantly. But I was not myself then. I was part of something larger. Now I am only me, and I am afraid. The human admiral felt no sympathy. Fear is what your species should have felt before attacking innocent civilizations. Now you will learn what individual responsibility means. Dongwu continued his documentation, creating detailed records of every human action. Admiral, I must note for the record that what you are planning goes beyond the traditional rules of warfare. Future generations may judge these actions as excessive. Chang Ho turned to face the investigator. Future generations will judge whether we saved galactic civilization or destroyed it. I accept that responsibility. Nei Young interrupted their conversation. Admiral, all weapons platforms are in position. Operation Broken Chain is ready for implementation. The human fleet had surrounded the Vexari core worlds with devices that looked like simple metal cylinders. Sujin studied them through her sensors but could not understand their function. What are those weapons? She asked. Consciousness disruptors, Chang Ho replied. They will create a quantum field that prevents neural networks from forming connections across separate biological entities. Any attempt to link minds will result in immediate neural shutdown. Il Sung, monitoring the human transmissions from his isolated position, felt something he had never experienced before: personal terror. You're going to make collective consciousness impossible forever? Even for species that might evolve it naturally? Especially for those species, Chang Ho confirmed. Collective consciousness is an evolutionary trap that leads to galactic domination attempts. We are closing that pathway permanently. Su Jin realized that the humans were not just winning a war, they were reshaping the fundamental rules of consciousness in the galaxy. This will affect the development of countless species that do not even exist yet. You are making decisions for civilizations that will not arise for millions of years. Yes, Chang Ho agreed. We are ensuring that those future civilizations will never face the threat of collective consciousness warfare. Dongwu finished his documentation of the weapons deployment. Admiral, I have completed my reports. These records will serve as either justification or condemnation for what we are about to do. I understand, Chang Ho replied. Begin operation. Broken chain. The consciousness disruptors activated simultaneously across thousands of light years. Su Jin watched her instruments detect quantum changes in the fundamental nature of space itself. The area around the Vexari core worlds became hostile to any form of linked consciousness. Il Sung felt the change immediately. His desperate attempts to reconnect with other surviving Vexari minds met an invisible wall that caused physical pain. It hurts, he broadcast. Trying to think with others hurts now. That is the point, Chang Ho replied. You and all surviving Vexari will live as individuals. You will develop personal identities, individual desires, and separate goals. You will never again be able to threaten other species through collective action. The operation spread outward from the core worlds at the speed of light. Entire sectors of space became zones where collective consciousness was physically impossible. Any species that attempted to link minds would experience neural damage that forced them back into individual awareness. Na-Young reported the results. Admiral, consciousness disruption field is stable across 12,000 star systems. All collective entities in the affected area have been forced into individual awareness. Su Jin watched the aftermath in stunned silence. The mighty Vexari Empire had been reduced to billions of confused individuals who could barely understand their own isolation. But the implications went far beyond the current war. You have changed the nature of evolution itself in a significant portion of the galaxy, she said. Species that might have naturally developed collective consciousness will now be forced to remain individual. Chang Ho studied the tactical displays showing the complete success of Operation Broken Chain. We have ensured that species will develop individual consciousness and personal responsibility instead of collective domination drives. Il Sung's voice crackled weakly over the communication system. What will happen to us now? We do not know how to exist as separate beings. You will learn, Chang Ho replied. Or you will not survive. That choice is now yours to make as individuals. Dongwu sealed his documentation files and transmitted them to Earth's military archives. Admiral, Operation Broken Chain is complete. The records show that we have successfully eliminated the collective consciousness threat while preserving individual life. Chang Ho nodded and gave the order that would end the war. All units prepare for occupation duty. We will now teach the galaxy how to live without the threat of hive mind domination. Su Jin realized that she was witnessing the birth of a new galactic order. Humans had not just won a war, they had imposed their vision of consciousness on a significant portion of the galaxy. Whether that vision would prove to be salvation or tyranny remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never again face the threat of collective consciousness warfare. Humanity had made sure of that. Governor Jinwu walked through the rebuilt streets of what had once been the Vexari capital world. 6 months after Operation Broken Chain, the planet looked nothing like the biomechanical hive it had been. Individual Vexari citizens moved through the streets, each going about their own separate business, each thinking their own private thoughts. The transformation was complete. Where once billions of minds had shared a single collective consciousness, now billions of individuals struggled to understand their own separate identities. Some adapted well, discovering creativity and personal ambition they had never imagined possible. Others remained lost, unable to cope with the isolation of individual awareness. "Governor," reported his aide, "the latest psychological evaluation shows that 68% of the former collective entities have successfully adapted to individual consciousness. The remainder are receiving therapy in specialized treatment centers." Jinwoo nodded as he reviewed the reports. Human occupation forces had established individual rights, personal property laws, and democratic governance systems throughout former Vexari territory. It was the largest social engineering project in galactic history. On the Coalition Historical Research Station, Misun worked to document the war's conclusion for future generations. The Therian historian had spent months interviewing participants from all sides, trying to understand how humanity had achieved total victory through methods that challenged every principle of civilized warfare. "The humans saved us," she wrote in her official report. "But they also changed us. The galaxy that emerges from this war will be fundamentally different from the one that existed before. Whether that change represents progress or tragedy remains to be determined." Her research had revealed disturbing facts about human military doctrine. Earth's forces had been prepared for this level of warfare from the beginning. They had weapons and tactics ready for conflicts that other species could not even imagine. The Vexari War had not forced humans to become monsters. It had simply revealed what they had always been capable of becoming. In a quiet apartment in the rebuilt Vexari capital, Aera sat by a window watching the sunset. 6 months ago, she had been part of a hive mind containing billions of consciousness. Now she was alone with her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own fears about the future. The transformation had been traumatic beyond description. For the first weeks of individual consciousness, Aera had experienced panic attacks whenever she realized that no other minds were sharing her thoughts. The silence inside her own head had seemed like death, but gradually she had begun to discover things that collective consciousness had made impossible. Personal preferences, individual creativity, the ability to disagree with others without causing neural feedback through the hive mind network. "I am Aera," she said to her reflection in the window. "I am not part of something larger, I am myself." The words still felt strange, but they no longer terrified her. Human therapists had helped her understand that individual consciousness was not isolation. It was freedom to choose her own path without the collective forcing decisions upon her. On Earth, veteran Seok Jin sat in a counseling session designed for soldiers returning from the Vexari War. The human military's psychological support systems were as advanced as their weapons, reflecting centuries of experience with the mental cost of extreme warfare. "I keep seeing their faces," Seokjin told his therapist. "The individual Vexari when they first realized they were alone in their own minds. The terror in their eyes when they understood what we had done to them." "You gave them individual consciousness," the therapist replied. "Many of them are discovering creativity, personal relationships, and individual achievement for the first time in their species' history. But we forced it on them," Seokjin said. "We made them into something they never chose to become." The therapist nodded. "That is the burden of victory in an absolute war. You saved galactic civilization, but you did it by becoming something that other species fear almost as much as they feared the Vexari." Coalition leader Gun-Ho stood in the new Galactic Council chambers, addressing representatives from hundreds of species. The war had ended with complete human victory, but the peace was proving more complex than anyone had anticipated. "We must address the reality of our new situation," he said to the assembled delegates. "Humanity has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our previous understanding of warfare. We must decide how to integrate them into galactic civilization." The debate had been ongoing for months. Some species wanted to honor humans as saviors who had ended the Vexari threat. Others feared that humanity itself might become a greater threat than the collective consciousness they had defeated. "The human protocols," Gun-Ho continued, represent our attempt to establish boundaries for when and how human military intervention might be acceptable in future conflicts. The protocols were humanity's own suggestion. Human forces would maintain a limited presence in galactic affairs, responding only to existential threats to civilization itself. But everyone understood the unspoken truth. If humans chose to ignore the protocols, no force in the galaxy could stop them. In her historical research center, Mi-sun completed her analysis of the war's long-term consequences. The HFY War marks the end of one galactic age and the beginning of another, she wrote. Collective consciousness is no longer a viable evolutionary path. Individual awareness has been established as the dominant form of sentience in this region of space. Her research had revealed that human consciousness disruptors continued to operate throughout the affected sectors. Any species that attempted to develop hive mind capabilities would find themselves forced back into individual awareness. Humanity had not just won a war, they had controlled evolution itself. Era, now working as an artist creating sculptures that expressed individual creativity, received a visit from Governor Jin Woo. The human administrator wanted to check on the progress of former collective entities adapting to individual consciousness. "How do you feel about your transformation?" he asked. Era considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she would not have been capable of personal opinions. Now she had thoughts and feelings that belonged to her alone. "I am grateful," she said finally. "But I am also angry that the choice was taken from us. We were never asked if we wanted to become individuals." Jinwoo nodded. "That is the nature of absolute victory. The winning side makes choices for everyone." "Will humans always make those choices for other species?" Era asked. "Only when necessary to preserve galactic civilization," Jinwoo replied. "But the definition of necessary will always be ours to determine." As the sun set on the former HFY capital, both the human governor and the individual HFY artist contemplated the galaxy that had emerged from the war. It was safer than before. Collective consciousness warfare was now impossible. But it was also a galaxy where one species possessed the power to reshape the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Seok-jin, having completed his therapy sessions, prepared to return to civilian life carrying the knowledge that he had participated in the most effective military campaign in galactic history. But he also carried the weight of understanding what humanity was capable of when threatened. Mi-sun finished her historical documentation with a final observation. "The HFY War taught us that survival sometimes requires becoming something we never intended to be. Humanity saved galactic civilization by proving they were willing to destroy any aspect of it that threatened the whole. The question that remains is whether the galaxy is better off under the protection of a species capable of such absolute warfare, or whether we have simply traded one existential threat for another. Time will tell whether humanity's victory represents the salvation of galactic civilization or the beginning of a new form of tyranny. What is certain is that the galaxy will never again face the threat of collective consciousness warfare. Humanity has made sure of that. The war was over, victory was complete, and the galaxy would spend generations learning to live with the consequences of what it had taken to achieve that victory. In the end, it was impossible to say whether humanity had saved civilization or conquered it. Perhaps there was no difference.